Hello and welcome. I'm Peggy. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to begin, I have a very lovely lady sitting here with me, and I wanted you to have a chance to meet her. Meka Childs is here with me. She is running for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. She has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Duke University. She has been a lifelong conservative. She has a daughter, and her husband is, I have to get his name right, Major Felix Childs, and he is United States Army Reserve.
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
And we're delighted to have you here in the upstate for a little visit.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell me, what is your thought about education and our children?
Well, I think it's important that we prepare every child for what they will face when they leave high school. My focus as State Superintendent of Education is to ensure that every child who graduates from high school in South Carolina is truly prepared for work or college and for citizenship. That's why I'm running, and my seeking this office is in part driven from what I experienced when I was going through school. See, I'm a product of public schools here in South Carolina. Finished out at Lexington II Airport High School. You're a native of
South Carolina.
I am, South Carolina, born and raised. I finished out in our public schools, went away to Duke University largely on scholarship, and there I stood proud of the fact that the education I received here in South Carolina prepared me for what I've faced since I've left high school. I've worked in education since I came back home to South Carolina, and what I've seen is that we have too many children who are not graduating on time. We have too many children who are graduating high school, entering the workforce, and finding that they lack essential skills to be successful in even entry-level positions. And we also have too many kids who are graduating high school, going off to college, and then realizing that they're going to have to take semesters and spend thousands of dollars taking remedial courses that don't even count towards their college degree. And I think this is wrong. What I like to do is make sure that just as sure as I was able to go through our schools and with hard work and perseverance and taking advantage of the great educational opportunity that was granted to me, I was able to leave school prepared. I want to know that every child who worked hard, perseveres, will be prepared through the education that we are offering. And so I'm singularly focused on making sure that the diploma matters. Every child who gets a diploma in our state should be prepared for work or college and for citizenship.
And there are jobs out there right now that the people don't have the skills to fill the jobs, so they go elsewhere and bring people in, and I think that's a tragedy.
That's correct, and that's what is what's called a skills gap, and unfortunately is growing. As I've traveled about the state, both in this role as a candidate, but before, when I've worked at the South Carolina Department of Education as a Deputy State Superintendent of Education, I served on Governor Mark Sanford's staff as his Senior Education Advisor. I've also worked with business and industry across our state when I spent some time in the public sector, and I've also served on the Education Oversight Committee. And in the experiences I've had working with people at the state level, but also working in the classroom, one of the things I've heard from business and industry leaders is that they have jobs to offer, but they struggle to find people with the skills, both hard skills and soft skills, necessary to be successful. So when you look at the idea of there being jobs that are unfilled, and we also have people who don't have jobs. That combination shouldn't exist. So what that tells me is that we have a wonderful opportunity to make sure that every child who graduates is not counted among that number of people who lack a job because they don't have the skills that are being demanded. And so we need to make sure that we're preparing our children to live out their dreams. I don't believe that we need an educator and a person, an adult in the system dictating to children what they should be, who they should be when they leave school. More of what I envision is a system that is working with parents to ensure that they, as parents, are steering their child in the right direction, and that the system is there to offer an educational service that will reinforce that child's aspirations and their hopes and their dreams.
I want you to comment on how you feel about parents, because you brought the magic word up there. Do parents need more choice than we have at present, or what did you feel about parents and choice?
Well, that's an important aspect of my platform. I'm focused on making sure our children are prepared when they leave high school. an important part of that is individualizing education. See, I believe that parents know best how and where their child should be educated. I believe that we need to empower parents with more educational freedom. So whether it's the traditional school to which your child is zoned, or a charter school, or a private school, a magnet school. We have families that are choosing to homeschool their children. I don't know if you remember, but we used to have apprenticeship programs in schools, and even virtual schools, which are newer. There's so many options that are coming about. I believe that we should not take any option off the table. Parents should be able to choose the option that is best for their child. However, we need to empower them to actually take the decision by allowing money to follow the child to the learning environment. And the reason I think that's important is actually comes from a personal experience. My parents, our family started out in Saluda. That's where my family on both sides is from, my mom and my dad. And they moved from Saluda County all the way over to Lexington County in West Columbia, which is where they raised my brothers and me. They moved because they wanted us to have better opportunities. But what we see is that while my parents had the option, they had the opportunity to move, not all parents have that. No. A parent shouldn't have to move. A parent shouldn't have to sneak. You have some parents who are effectively lying about where they live because they can't afford to move. They can't afford to pay the intra-district transfer fee. I call it a tuition. They can't afford to put their child in private school. It shouldn't be the case that a parent can see an option that will serve their child well and have to steal the educational service that will best meet their child's need. My view is that zip code should not dictate destiny. My belief is that we need to make sure that when a parent wants to move their child into an environment, by allowing the money to follow the child to an environment that their parents choose, we're going to increase the choices that are available to parents. The important thing about that, though, is if you look at the districts, the states, the cities that have real educational freedom, it benefits not just the children whose parents are taking the option, but that competition, those market forces begin to benefit even the children in the schools that are affected by being exposed to a vibrant educational marketplace. Because competition does for education the same thing it does for everything else.
Okay, so you're looking for the best teachers to put in our schools.
Yes.
And you can have a great school, but every child is different, and they learn in a different way.
Yes.
And the school may be tops, but maybe your child needs a little something different.
Well, I can speak from my experience as a teacher. I taught 6th and 7th grade social studies.
Oh, you are brave.
Well, I originally wanted to teach high school, but the superintendent of the district where I interviewed and where I accepted a job asked me to go meet with a young principal that he was starting out in a middle school. And I took the interview as a courtesy, but I was so impressed with the vision that he put forward and what I thought would be a very supportive environment that I said, okay, I'll try middle school. And I fell in love with it. Those kids are going through a transition. The name middle is completely appropriate for middle school kids. But what I saw as I was teaching is that while I was offering a high quality product, the reality is that in a classroom of 20 or 30 children, while I may offer a great service to the vast majority, those 2 or 3 or 5 kids who just need something a little or maybe even drastically different, we need to make sure that their parents have options. So it's not to say that parents are making choices because the teacher's not good or because the school's not good. In many cases, it will simply be because there's a better fit. And one example I often think of is a young man who has ADHD. And in the environment where he was, we were doing all we could, but I also knew that there was a private school in West Columbia that focused on serving children with ADD or ADHD. And if his parents could afford it, they would have placed him in that environment that would have been all but crafted just for him, but they couldn't afford it. And with something like a tax credit or a voucher or a tax deduction or a scholarship, I mean, you can name the funding mechanism whatever you like. All I know is if those parents were empowered with money following their child to the learning environment that they could choose, he could have had different outcomes.
Yeah, yeah. So you're for school choice, for helping parents to help put the child where the child is going to excel.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that's an essential component of what we need to do. We need to make sure that we're individualizing education. I also believe that we need to make sure that we are attracting the very best teachers for our students, and that's one of my pledges.
How do you do that?
Well, we need to think differently about how we approach recruiting teachers. One of the things that I would like to do is get out on the college campuses and encourage people who are not necessarily majoring in education, our math majors, let's get them to think about entering into education. And there are all sorts of things that we can do to attract teachers to the profession. I want us to think differently about how we recruit on our college campuses. I'll tell you, when I was at Duke University, there were corporations that would come to that campus and try and recruit our graduates. And that same level of vigor is what we need to apply to try and get the very best and brightest to come into the teaching profession. I think we also need to look at the way we allow folks to come in from other professions. We want to make sure we're keeping the wrong people out of the profession, but we don't want to throw up barriers that block people from coming in who'd be great teachers. I also want us to esteem our teachers. Teaching is a noble profession, and if you look at the countries, if you look at the states that are growing, an important part of that is having great teachers leading classrooms and strong leaders leading schools. And so I want to make sure that we're supporting and reinforcing excellent instruction. And so there are several things that we will need to do. Overall, we need to look at the system by which we recruit, support, and offer professional development to our educators so that we'll have the very best teachers leading our students.
What about class size? Do you have any special, I know it's not easy. With funding and all that, to say, well, we're only going to have X number of students in a class. But it's true that when the class gets way too large, it's hard for the teacher and it's hard for the kids.
Well, there are several variables that will determine the optimum class size for any age group and for any subject. One of the things I know is that, one, when you're dealing with things like class size, we need to make sure that those are locally driven decisions. I don't think we need to sit in Columbia, and we definitely don't want folks from Washington, D.C. trying to dictate to us what's the right size. What research is showing is that you need to match the instructional practices used with the size of the class. Because if you reduce class size, but don't change the instructional strategies to match the fact that you now have fewer students, well, it's not going to get the sort of outcomes that people usually expect to result from reducing class size. So I say all that to get to a point. You'll have people who almost view class size reductions as a sacred cow, but what research is indicating is that younger students tend to benefit more from class size. It's also indicating that it's very important for instructional strategies to change when you reduce class size. And so there are things that we need to consider, but at the end of the day, if you reduce class size or increase class size and the quality of the instruction is not strong, it will not have a positive impact. I'd rather have children in a larger classroom with a great teacher who knows how to work with that size of a class than to have a smaller classroom with an ineffective teacher.
Okay. So we're out of time, but I appreciate that you took the time to share with us today. Meka Childs, who is the South Carolina Superintendent of Education. She is running for that position. And we wish you well. God bless you and the work that you do with our children. And to me, education is like a triangle. You've got the school, the instructor, you've got the parents, you've got the children. And it takes all three. And we'll have success. Bless you. Thank you so much, Meka. We'll be right back.